Of course. All right. Kenny, Ryan, we're good to go?
We are good to go. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Commissioner Dorner, we now see your face. Good morning, everybody. The time is 11:31, and I will call the May 2nd, 2024 Planning Board meeting to order. We are joined by our Vice Chair Bailey. Good morning, Ms. Bailey.
Good morning.
And we have Commissioner Washington.
Good morning, all.
And Commissioner Dorner.
Hello.
And I'm Chair Shapiro. Please note that the deadline for all participant pre-registration and for all submission of materials and exhibits was 12 noon on the Tuesday before this planning board meeting. As always, registered speakers may join the meeting with a link provided in the email provided by the planning board office, or listen by phone by utilizing the call-in number provided in the email. And of course, anyone may tune in to watch our proceedings via live stream. If you wish to speak or become a person of record, you can see the information there before you run the screen. In addition to the commissioners, we have our principal counsel, Mr. Warner. Good morning. We have Jessica Jones, our planning board administrator. We have Joe Parsons, our senior technical hearing writer, and James Hunt, the division chief for the Development Review Division. Good morning, Mr. Hunt. We also have Mr. Flanagan and Mr. Crowner helping us with technology behind the scenes. And with that, we will move on to our agenda. We're going to have one change in the order of cases, folks. We're going to take up item 11 as the first item when we get to our regular agenda items. Everything else will be as listed in the agenda. If there are no commissioners' items, then we'll move to item 2 on our agenda. I'd look for a motion to approve the draft minutes of April 25th, 2024.
Motion to approve draft minutes.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Washington. There's no discussion. I will call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
But aye.
Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Next, there are no legislative updates. So nothing under item 3A. So we go to item 3C and D. These are parks and rec items. The FY24 operating budget expenditure request and FY25 budget adjustments. Ms. Herring, are you going to take these items up separately or as one? Or I see Director Tyler. Let me start with you, Director Tyler, if there's anything you want to say as we begin.
I do want to say good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the Planning Board. What a wonderful day to be here with you. And Ms. Herring is going to present to you our adjusted budget. And I'm going to pass it over to her. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to present that the financial outlook for fiscal year 24 indicates a potential savings within the Park and Recreation funds. A memorandum has been presented to the Planning Board requesting permission to use a portion of these funds that are arising from anticipated personnel savings to address the department's pressing needs. The projected savings for the Park Fund amounts to $6,695,097, with a proposed allocation of $4,731,724 for the following items. We'd like to request $2,129,000 for significant maintenance initiatives, $2,600,000 for equipment acquisitions and professional services. In the Recreation Fund, we foresee savings of $2,286,340. Conversely, the Enterprise Fund is facing a deficit of $298,000, mainly due to the turf equipment maintenance and golf cart repair costs. This shortfall will be compensated for by the cancellation of this year's Bladensburg Marina dredging project. So we will not have to have that deficit because of the shortfall. Please note that we are actively working to curtail the practice of depending on year-end funding for fulfilling essential needs and projects. And our efforts are focused on minimizing the reliance on year-end funding as a mechanism to address and sustain critical requirements. We appreciate the planning board's consideration of this funding reallocation request.
Thank you, Ms. Herring. Commissioners, as you can imagine, a whole lot of work has gone into this behind the scenes, and I really appreciate all the good work that you all do. Director Tyler, Ms. Herring, job well done. Crossing all the T's and dotting the I's when it comes to our budget. And Commissioners, any questions for staff related to these changes? Seeing none, then what is your pleasure?
I move that we approve the reallocation request, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Got a motion and a second for the allocation request. So this is two. This is item 3C and 3D. Without objection, Mr. Warder will take this up as one vote. I assume that's okay. If there's no discussion on the motion, then I will call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Ms. Herring. Thank you, Director Tyler.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all very much.
All right, next we'll go to our consent agenda. We have items 4B and D. Anyone from the public or any commissioners who wish to oppose staff's recommendation, discuss any of these items? If not, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, after consideration of the records for items 4B and 4D, I move adoption of staff findings and approval of these items on the consent agenda in accordance with the recommendation of staff.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Washington. With no discussion, I will call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Next, we'll go to item 11 on our agenda. We're on to the regular agenda. We'll start with item 11, and then we'll go through all the other items in the order in which they're listed on the agenda. Item 11 is a DSP detailed site plan 89016-06 Auto Spa Express. We have Mr. Tedesco representing the applicant. We have Mr. Price who's giving the staff presentation. This is an evidentiary hearing, so if there's anyone who's going to be speaking, I'll swear them in at the appropriate time. And with that, I'll turn to Mr. Price. Is it Mr. Price?
Yes, it is.
Yes, there you are. I see you, sir. Mr. Price for the staff presentation. Take it away.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. For the record, I'm Todd Price with the Urban Design Section. Item 11, DSP-89016-06, an amendment to the detailed site plan for Auto Spa Express, is requesting approval for the redevelopment of an existing car wash facility. This redevelopment will include a new automated car wash and associated site improvements. The subject property is located to the southeast quadrant of the intersection of Conti Road and Mid-Atlantic Boulevard. This application has been reviewed and evaluated in accordance with the prior zoning ordinance, and the prior zone was I-1. The Urban Design Section recommends the Planning Board adopt the findings of the technical staff report and approve DSP-89016-06 with the conditions found in the report. The applicant has reviewed the technical staff report and is in full agreement. Staff has not had any community feedback or opposition to this application, and this concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Commissioners, if there's no questions for staff, I will turn to the applicant, Mr. Tedesco. Anything you want to add?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. For the record, Matthew Tedesco, law firm of McNamee Hosey, here on behalf of the applicant, WLR Automotive Group Incorporated, which is a Maryland-based company. With me this morning, I have Mr. Chad Bond from the applicant, Mr. Nick Speech, and Robert Hubbard from Bowler Engineering. Don't anticipate they'll need to be sworn in or testify, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, thank you for the accommodation to take this case out of order. Thank Mr. Hunt, Ms. Garland, and certainly Mr. Price for their review of this application. There weren't really any major issues to speak of as it related to the review of this application. I want to thank staff for its review. We did have some inquiries with Ms. Brooke Larman, who is in your permit review section, supervisor. Just wanted to thank her publicly. I know she doesn't typically attend planning board hearings, but was very helpful in working out one very, very minor issue as it related to the parking that was able to present this case to you in the manner in which it is this morning. So with that, Mr. Price is correct. We are in agreement with staff's recommendation. We do not have any additional exhibits with any requested revisions to findings or conditions. And I would just submit and incorporate and adopt our justification statement in your backup, pages 1 through 42 as additional testimony. And with that, we would respectfully request your approval and thank you once again.
Thank you, Mr. Tedesco. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? If there are none, we have no one who signed up to speak on this matter. So I will close the hearing, and commissioners, it's to us for deliberation. And if there's no deliberation, I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve DSP-89016-06 along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Price. Thank you, Mr. Tedesco.
Thank you all very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. We'll now move on to item 5 on our regular agenda. This is Community Planning Division staff draft for West Hyattsville Queens Chapel sector plan and proposed sectional map amendment. We have Mr. Rowe who giving staff presentation. There may be other folks who will be joining in as well. Staff is looking for action from us. They're looking for us to approve the permit and to release to the public the staff draft. So let me turn it over to staff for the presentation. We have Mr. Rowe, Ms. Kluart.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair Shapiro and members of the board. For the record, Scott Rowe with the Community Planning Division, Project Manager for the West Hyattsville Queens Chapel Sector Plan and Sectional Map Amendment. Joined this morning by Lindsay Kluart, Deputy Project Manager from the Long Range Planning Section, and Sarah Benton, Supervisor of the Long Range Planning Section. We're here this morning to request the board's permission to release the second staff draft West Hyattsville Queens Chapel Sector Plan and its proposed sectional map amendment to the public for its review and comment, and to transmit the plan's public facilities referral to the county executive, county council, and municipalities pursuant to the requirements of section 273502 of the zoning ordinance. Next slide, please. Morning, I'm going to provide you with a brief background and overview of the plan area, discuss how we engage with the community and stakeholders over the last 3+ years, talk about the major issues, key recommendations within the staff draft sector plan and proposed SMA, speak about recommendations for implementation, and go over the next steps in the legislative approval process. Next slide, please. As you may recall, this sector plan was initiated by the County Council in October 2020 and reinitiated in January 2022 with a concurrent sectional map amendment. The initial staff draft sector plan and proposed SMA were released to the public in July of 2022. You and the County Council held a joint public hearing on the first staff draft plan and proposed SMA in October 2022. Subsequent to that public hearing, the County Council enacted 2 zoning bills that permitted development incompatible with the staff draft sector plan. Next slide, please. So as you recall, in December 2022, due to the aforementioned legislation, you remanded the plan and SMA back to staff. Around the same time frame, staff received input from the Department of the Environment that identified some inconsistencies between the initial staff draft plan's proposal and the county's adopted action plan. In January 2023, the County Council repealed the zoning bills that had caused concern in 2022. And we've spent much of the last year and a half revising the staff draft sector plan and proposed SMA based on the testimony that we received at the October 2022 joint public hearing and the input that we've heard from several stakeholders, including the Department of the Environment, as well as updating information just based on things that have changed since July of 2022. Next slide, please. The sector plan area is located in the northwestern part of the county along the Metrorail Green Line and the northwest branch of the Anacostia River and is entirely within Council District 2. Next slide, please. Sector plan includes portions of the city of Hyattsville, the city of Mount Rainier, and the town of Brentwood. The plan area abuts the Prince George's Plaza Hyattsville Crossing Regional Transit District on the north and the District of Columbia on the south, and includes and surrounds the boundary of the 2006 West Hyattsville Transit District Development Plan. Next slide, please. Over the past 3.5 years, the project team has convened and met with 7 focus groups, conducted more than 40 stakeholder interviews, held several virtual, hybrid, and in-person engagement events in both English and Spanish, and maintained several online resources for people to learn more and participate in the planning process. Next slide, please. As with all of our plans, this plan contains goals, policies, and strategies covering each of these 8 elements of a comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. The major issues here, primarily those identified prior to the release of the first staff draft sector plan in July 2022. They include minimal development activity since the 1960s, community concerns about pedestrian access and safety, flood risks, lack of housing immediately around the metro stations, and a general lack of sense of place and community gathering spaces. Next slide, please. Key recommendations for the plan are listed on the next 2 slides. They include redeveloping the areas around the Hyattsville Crossing and West Hyattsville metro stations with vertical, mixed-use, walkable development, transforming the road system into a walkable network of complete streets that serve all users safely, acquiring and preserving, rather than developing, properties within the floodplain, concentrating retail around the metro stations. Next slide, please. Constructing a variety of new housing types at a range of price points, especially in the Queens Chapel Manor neighborhood between the 2 metro stations, where the proposed SMA recommends rezoning the neighborhood to the RSFA zone to allow for the construction of additional 1, 2, and 3 family homes, developing a cohesive branding, wayfinding, and public art strategy, and adding new parks, plazas, and public open spaces for the community to enjoy. Next slide, please. The next 2 slides show the major changes in this staff draft versus the previous 2022 staff draft sector plan. They include no longer recommending development in the floodplain except where it has been previously approved, eliminating the previously recommended comprehensive floodplain mitigation program, recommending additional housing choices in the Queens Chapel Manor neighborhood. Next slide, please. Eliminating traffic level of service standards within the local transit center. Such standards are not appropriate for urbanized areas. Acquiring Queenstown apartments unless DPI allows them to rebuild. Redeveloping North Point apartment homes, which are diagonally across Yeager Road from the metro station. And preserving Queens Park Plaza and Rainier Manor to ensure that affordable housing options are available, especially for seniors. Next slide, please. This map shows the recommended boundary of the West Hyattsville Local Transit Center. This is an expansion from the boundary that was approved in Plan 2035. Next slide, please. This map shows the recommended boundary of the Prince George's Plaza Regional Transit District. This is an expansion of the boundary as it was previously approved in the 2016 Prince George's Plaza Transit District Development Plan to add properties immediately across Bellcrest Road from the Hyattsville Crossing Metro Station. Next slide, please. This map shows the recommended master plan of transportation street network for the plan area. Note that all streets within the plan area are recommended as urban center streets, where use of the county's updated urban street design standards will be required as streets are constructed or reconstructed. Next slide, please. This map shows recommended bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Solid lines show facilities that exist, and dashed lines show facilities that have yet to be constructed. The system will greatly increase access to the metro system and the regional trail network for plan area residents. Next slide, please. This map shows amendments to the countywide green infrastructure network. largely to delete properties that have been developed and to add a new conservation easement associated with a development that occurred. Next slide, please. This slide depicts the plan's recommended park, recreation, and open space facilities. The highlight of these recommendations is the implementation of a greenway trail and linear park system called the West Hyattsville Greenway that connects the northern and southern sides of the plan area across the northwest branch of the Anacostia River. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed future land use plan for the West Hyattsville Queens Chapel sector. It reinforces the plan's recommendations for vertical mixed use around the metro stations, neighborhood scale mixed uses along Maryland 208, Hamilton Street in Hyattsville, and Varnum Street in Mount Rainier. It also shows recommended commercial uses for areas in the floodplain, underscoring the plan's recommendation that these areas remain in commercial use until such a point as they could be acquired for floodplain mitigation and preservation. Next slide, please. This map simply shows the existing zoning as it was approved in the countywide map amendment. Next slide, please. The next 3 slides depict the 35 zoning changes recommended in the proposed SMA to implement the sector plan's recommendations. These rezonings recommend reclassifying over 1,100 properties within the sector plan area. Most of these rezonings, however, are within 3 neighborhoods. As we discussed earlier, rezoning the Queens Chapel Manor neighborhood to RSFA to support missing middle housing, rezoning the riverfront at West Hyattsville Townhouse community to the LTO Edge Zone, commensurate with the plan's recommendation to prohibit townhomes in the LTO Core Zone, which is actually currently before the council in CB 15 2024, and rezoning Avondale Ridge townhomes to the RMF 20 zone to reflect the density at which they were constructed. They are currently in the RMF 48 zone. Next slide, please. This is simply the table of rezonings that are shown on the map to the left. This is the next batch, and the next slide. And this is the rest of that table showing the 35 rezonings. Next slide, please. As with all of our master and sector plans, this plan contains a detailed implementation table that illustrates lead and partner agencies for each implementation action, along with a recommended time frame. This plan, like all plans, will require the coordinated and dedicated action of stakeholders and agencies to maintain momentum towards plan implementation. Next slide, please. This slide's a brief reminder of the long and winding road that we've taken to get to this point. Next slide, please. The joint public hearing for this plan and SMA is scheduled for Monday, July 8th at 6 p.m. Following that, we hope to be back before you to discuss public testimony and to recommend adoption of the sector plan and endorsement of the SMA. If all goes well, the council will approve this plan and SMA in November. If the council wants to add amendments not based on the public record, they will have to hold a second joint public hearing, at which point the plan would then be approved in the spring of 2025. Next slide, please. This concludes staff's presentation. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe and team. Commissioners, questions for staff?
So I already reached out directly to staff and provided some comments on just like bike and pedestrian safety, like in these areas. And I know those will carry through later on as we're kind of like figuring out how to implement things. I do have one question, but then I have one kind of request that I forgot to kind of like reach out in terms of just experiencing this area. So in terms of signage and kind of wayfinding, there are 2 kind of directional points that I think we're failing in some ways in this area. One is when we're going to the West Hyattsville Metro, it's not clear where people are supposed to get dropped off if they're driving there or if they're getting like a ride share or something around there. It's confusing and people often will go into like the bus parking area So I think there needs to be better signage on both probably Hamilton and Eggers. You're going into the West Hyattsville area, and then potentially even kind of south of there if you're kind of cutting up by the trail, because it's just not obvious like where people are supposed to go. And then when you're getting off the metro and kind of coming into the locations, there's a ton of missed opportunity for signage to tell people where to go and what's around that area, particularly if we want to promote some of the kind of commercial mixed use that you've got in here. It just in particular, like how do you even get home? There's no clear signage of like where ride shares would go. So just kind of like same comment like coming in when you're going out, it's not obvious that like the cars are supposed to be on the right side as you're kind of coming out of the metro, and that's where you pick up like a ride share and kind of having the dedicated sort of space in there. And just even if it's not like an assigned space, just having it there so people know where to kind of go and find a ride share and where to grab them would be good. Because sometimes the ride shares will go over to where the parking lot is. And then that's just really frustrating, especially if it's like raining or other stuff for people as they're kind of looking around and trying to figure out how to get out. Something that you might want to work on with Metro is that once you walk out of the Metro gates, it's really hard to figure out when the bus is coming. And right now the buses are on terrible schedules. If you look at Google Maps, it was coordinated really well before where you could see when the next bus is coming. But because of construction and limited routes and stuff, Google Maps is not accurate anymore. And when I walk outside the gates and I want to figure out like when is the F8 coming to like go back to Hyattsville or something else, I have no way of doing that. I have to kind of like lean around the gate and kind of go back into there. Whereas when I'm walking out, I can see it certainly before I go past the turnstiles. But once I go past that, like it's game over. The only thing I can see is like the Metro cars coming to and from. So having a better sort of experience with people that are in there would be good and helpful to kind of improve, I think, that particular area for transit. The other thing I wanted to ask about was, I think it's slide 20 on the future land use. So if you can pull that up, I was looking at Hamilton and 35th because we've got mixed use. Yeah, so I don't know if you can zoom in, but we have the dark kind of purple mixed use that's now kind of coming out and taking over some of the existing zoning. And there was a zone that was, I want to say it was like CGO before, that now is the neighborhood mixed use, which is kind of like the lighter purple. I was wondering why we don't have those as the darker kind of mixed use in terms of the future land use, particularly the one parcel that's kind of like just stuck there on the north side of Hamilton and to the west of 35th. But then also like as you go across to the other side where you've got some office space there that could potentially be mixed use, that would be consistent with kind of the part that's the darker purple across the street. And I realize you want to step down density eventually, but I don't know if that's necessarily the right place to go because at least the light purple is on the north side is adjacent to like a mixed use that's higher density right there, and might be useful to have a slightly higher land use for the future land use map. So I just wanted to ask like what the thought around that was, because it seemed kind of like there's no other light purple really around that area. If you go south of the metro or even like into like the northwest of the metro, it just sort of seems kind of oddly placed right there.
Sure, I can tackle those in reverse order. It's been the practice of the planning department to only recommend the dark purple mixed use within Plan 2035 centers. Where we recommend mixed use in the commercial zones outside of centers is when we use the light purple neighborhood mixed use for future land use category. And the commercial neighborhood zone that's recommended does recommend 48 dwelling. It does allow up to 48 dwelling units per acre. So there are opportunities for mixed use and density there, but at a, it encourages a slightly smaller scale to step down from the high densities in the center versus densities of development that are along strips that are surrounded by single family detached neighborhoods. So
I understand the definitional thing, but why would you do that on that? So I don't know if we can zoom in, but the light purple that's right adjacent to the dark purple that's just west of 35th and north of Hamilton is literally adjacent to the parcel. I think it's maybe a single family home right now, but it's adjacent to the commercial spaces that are right there. So I could understand maybe doing like the lighter purple where you've got like the Best Way supermarket and stuff a little bit east of there. But it seems like kind of odd to have the light purple next to the dark purple right there. And it's hard to see on the screen.
For generally speaking, what we try to avoid when we're doing new plans and SMAs is to place a property in a zoning category where they can't physically develop without parcel assemblage. Obviously, we want to see for some of these areas, we're going to see parcels assemble. But this particular property is a business operated out of a single family home on a pretty small lot with not a lot of access. I believe it's access off of the side street. So when looking at that, we wanted to kind of have that transitional area there and allow for something that could be a mix of uses there, something more up on the street and less setback, but not at the densities that are to the west of that. But we could certainly, we'll take a look at that over the course of the next few months as we receive testimony and again at the work session.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're talking about like exactly what you said in terms of like assembling the parcels to like have a bigger project, like that would all the more reason be a dark purple for there because it's right next to the existing building right there. If we wanted to take the other existing businesses that are between at the corner of Queens Chapel and Hamilton and allow somebody to have higher density and bring the building frontage close to like the street side, then having that additional parcel right next to it to the east would make sense to do that potentially.
Point taken. As far as the access to buses and the wayfinding at the West Hyattsville station, a couple of points. A lot of what concerns you raised in your comments are things we should work with WMATA and City of Hyattsville on now because they're about how one would access the station or access buses from the station currently. The sector plan calls for a complete redevelopment of the station area where the bus loading and unloading facilities and where rideshare would be and where the parking and there probably wouldn't be much, if any, park and ride. All of that will change as redevelopment occurs on WMATA's property. And so the plan does have recommendations that the wayfinding should be clear for how people access the stations and certainly for more bus information at the stations. I think that's something that is a general recommendation for all of our metro stations. It is challenging at some of them, especially those that don't have the new TVs with the bus schedules on them. As to your point about WMATA and sticking to timetables, I experienced that personally yesterday, so very familiar with what you're talking about. And that is certainly something that I've raised to WMATA as a customer, but we can certainly reinforce when we meet with them because frankly, their current system of telling you where the bus is may not always be accurate or real time. When they say the bus is at before your stop and then the bus is after your stop and you're like, I'm standing right here, the bus never came by. So we certainly understand that one. And we certainly will look at wayfinding because you're right. We want people to be able to get off the train or get on the train and know where they're going and know how to get there. And especially on foot, as well as if they're driving to the station. Again, the plan recommends what WMATA is already in the process of doing, which is consolidating parking, more of the park and ride parking at Hyattsville Crossing to develop the surface lot at West Hyattsville. But certainly we want people to know how to get around. So the plan does make recommendations on that. We can look for opportunities to strengthen it.
Yeah, I think even like on foot is a great point because if you go out of that metro and you just walk north to like right where like the bus lot goes around, and you're trying and you decide, the bus isn't coming, I'm just going to walk somewhere, and you try and walk off the site. There's like a sidewalk that goes nowhere on like one of the medians, and it's not obvious how to get like out of there because like once you get to a certain point, you're actually entrapped inside the fence and you can't get out, and you have to actually walk backwards to get out. So just having WMATA even just walk on their own site to realize like it's terrible how it's designed right now would be useful so that we can think about like how do we actually do something in a non-car centric kind of environment where we're thinking about people actually walking around or using bikes or however they would get around other than driving a car. Because it's fine to get in and out in some degree if you can figure out how to get in and out in a car, but if you're doing other modes of transit, then it's not ideal at the moment right now. So yeah, thinking, and if you want to bring in me to like give them, here's how like users use the area, I'm happy to join calls like later on just to provide advice of like what I've done, because I've skipped the bus many times because it doesn't come on time and I'm just waiting. So then I jump on a bike and grab a bike to go elsewhere. So it's great to have multiple modes of transit at the station, but there could be a lot of improvements to just make transit more nice in that area.
Certainly, and these are all things that we're going to be tackling through the ongoing update to the countywide master plan of transportation. Go Prince George's.
Awesome. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, any other questions you have for Mr. Rowe, team? I've got a couple. First of all, a comment, which is I really, really appreciate the emphasis on, for this effort, the emphasis on placemaking and the emphasis on missing middle housing. This is just a very, very creative and innovative approach that you all are taking. I really, really appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out. Couple specific questions. One is just educate me. When you said, I just didn't look in the details of this, when you said you were recommending the acquisition of the Queenstown apartments, unless there's a sort of a waiver that allows them to continue building or redeveloping the floodplain, who are you recommending acquires that?
That is something that is should be an ongoing conversation. In some cases, because of the amount of property that needs to be acquired in Prince George's County to mitigate floodplain, it's not always a given that it would be Park and Planning that would acquire it. So that's something that would be a follow-up conversation. It could be acquired by DPR as part of the Northwest Branch Stream Valley Park, or acquired by the town of Brentwood or the city of Mount Rainier, or someone else that wants to do something with that property that's appropriate for being in the floodplain. There's just a lot of ongoing questions and uncertainty about that property. How it needs a new floodplain mapping, and they want to redevelop. So we're trying to provide enough flexibility there where we can get the best outcome for the community. But it's certainly right now the situation that it is that you've got a over 1,100 unit apartment complex in the floodplain, and that is a challenge. That poses great risk to those residents. So the process will continue to play out, and as conditions change over the course of the next year, certainly we'll work with you and the board and the council to make any changes to the plan that are necessary. It's kind of an ongoing discussion between the property owner and the county.
But help me to understand how unusual is it that we recommend that an 1,100 unit apartment complex be demolished?
Unfortunately, it happens from time to time. It's something that, the plan contains recommendations that part and parcel of such an action would require the county to proactively relocate residents, similar to what happened at over by Naylor Road with the apartments over there, which were condemned. And we had to, the county was very proactive in relocating tenants. And what the plan recommends is to relocate those tenants somewhere similarly close to Metro, so they're not losing the locational advantages of living in this community while moving somewhere that could be possibly safer.
And last one on this, is there, is it your practice when you're making recommendations like this to consider alternative construction methods with a recommendation like this? The reason why I'm asking is because, you know, as complicated it is environmentally, you're talking about a whole lot of housing that's right next to the metro. And it's complicated, right? Because it is in a floodplain. But is it possible to also recommend either redevelopment or some kind of retrofitting that addresses the issues, or is it just not practical because they're garden apartments in a floodplain?
There may be possibilities. There aren't very many options to address the existing buildings as they stand, except for maybe there needs to be a strengthening of the levee system. Maybe there needs to be additional pumps. They face that particular location face risks from both riverine flooding and all of the stormwater coming downhill and backing up behind the levee. So there's a bit of a challenge there. But also when it comes to construction in the floodplain, there are few options that don't inherently either push the floodwaters to other communities or create a situation where you're stuck in a podium over top of floodwaters for days. And invariably, Prince George's County has to come rescue you, and then you turn around and sue Prince George's County for allowing your house to be built. Mm-hmm. And so it's very challenging to deal with properties that were built in the floodplain. Again, some of these properties, like Queenstown, was built so long ago that probably wasn't in the floodplain when it was built.
In the 40s, would we say?
It was built in the 40s, and then they built the levee, and then it was fine. But as more and more development occurs uphill, you get more and more storm water going right downhill, and it gets to the levee, and it has nowhere to go. They do have a pumping station there, but it's unclear whether or not it's adequate enough to really address the concerns there. So it's really, an ongoing thing. And so we wanted to give them the opportunities, because they are exploring redevelopment, to look at all the options and really to, make sure that if they come up with a mitigation strategy to redevelop there, that it's something that DPI is blessed in this new environmental consciousness of the climate action plan. And is something, especially that it doesn't push floodwater down rivers to vulnerable communities downriver.
All right, that's very helpful, and I appreciate how thoughtful you've been around this, and it helped educate me. So I appreciate that response. So a couple other quick ones. First of all, on well, forget that. So the only other one I have is, you mentioned the Greenway. Can you bring up a slide that shows that?
I don't think the slide on Parks and Recreation kind of shows a map of it.
And I'm wondering, with the Greenway, what kind of conversations you've been in with our Department of Parks and Recreation around that, or is there more conversations that you could be having? I just don't know the extent of it.
A little of both. The plan includes some, artist depictions of what that could look like. Of course, I believe the word that was used by DPR staff, the grandiosity of it, causes a little bit of concern. But this is something that, in a 25-year sector plan, put the idea out there, talk about what it could be, and then, that it's something to work toward in the future. Because parts of it could be built as development occurs, and parts of it are going to require capital projects. And we have the crossings of the river now. So, if it's the crossing of the river is the last thing that needs to be built, we do have those crossings currently existing on our traditional park bridges over the river. So it's something that would be phased in over time. It's the recommended park and open space facility. I think it's maybe 2 slides ahead of this one. That one.
There we go. Yep,
go back one.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of ultimately new bridges over the river, side paths along some of the roads. On the south side, it would be a linear park or linear greenway in the median similar to what we have on American Way in National Harbor. It's a mix of facilities, but the idea of creating some sort of connected network is something that really resonated with the community during the plan development process.
Right. And I think what I would say is, first of all, I'm glad you're in conversation with DPR. They're going to look at it through a different lens, and I don't, fault them for being mindful of, well, we're the ones who are going to have to pay for this. But I think I really encourage you to go big and proud with this really, really innovative, transformative idea. I mean, because this is, for me, this is, building off the assets that are there in a really, really unique way. So I love this, and just amplify it as much as you can.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's all I have. Commissioners, any other questions, thoughts, reactions? If
Actually,
not,
I'm
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask about that because I noticed the sort of floating aspect of the Greenway on that slide. Is that going up Jamestown then, on like the north side of that? Would that go up like James? Is that what you would be proposing? Just like shut down the road and do that?
We weren't recommending shutting down the road. It'd be a side path along the road.
Okay, so this would be just like a paved kind of like path area that you would use as like a park, or how would you envision that like yellow shape going all the way around?
Yeah, different segments have different kind of vision for them. Along Jamestown Road, it would probably be a side path with additional street trees, furniture, etc., to create a more park-like setting. Between the metro and across the river to Chilham Road, it would be more of a linear park with a trail, or a shared use path, I should say, with trees on either side and vegetation and interpretive signage, so people can learn more about the history of the area, about the importance of the Anacostia River, and also about some of the environmental stewardship activities that are going on along the river. And then it would be on that southern leg, segment C, it would be a linear park with furniture, street trees, maybe some vendor opportunities, in a path that goes in the median of a otherwise, I believe, 2-lane street on which buildings would front, a more urban setting.
Okay, yeah, I really like that area. It's always struck me as kind of like an underutilized space right in there, particularly down Jamestown, because we have the parks trails like going right through there, just west towards like Silver Spring and that area as you kind of keep going by the metro. And then you're coming out of the metro going down Jamestown, and there's just nothing there right now. People walk down it frequently, but that could really activate the businesses on the other side, on like the east side of Jamestown, that are just kind of like sitting there, and give them like more foot traffic kind of going through. So I think that would be great. On the levy, I did want to ask one question on the apartments that the chair had brought up for Queenstown apartments. There's our trail that goes alongside there and kind of follows the river. And then there's also a raised trail that's over there that's like, I think it's called the Levee Trail or something, that actually is between our trail and the apartments themselves. Would it be possible, and this is probably a question you may not know entirely, but would it be possible to have some kind of a drainage component on where that levee trail is, where they would have to kind of redesign it, and they would have kind of like things going in that you'd have spaces that the water flow could actually go into the levee, and it would essentially just be a reconstructed like pipe or tube or drainage system that the trail would then sit on top of? Like, you would have to take off the trail at some point, but that would at least protect some of the apartments right there, and might be a less costly way of kind of mitigating some of the runoff before it even gets there. Because right now it's just a mound, and it would just have to absorb the water. But if it had some sort of a drainage system that was built into it, then it would serve dual purposes. And if that would work in an engineering sense, you could actually run that all the way to like Route 1 and protect some of the other surrounding neighborhoods that have flooding challenges right now as well.
So that's what exists there currently at Queenstown. They have a drainage through the levee where water can get through to get to the river. And so the plan recommends taking a fresh look at that. Do they need additional pumping capacity there? Or something more like that. So yeah, it's certainly something that we're looking at, and that is how it is drained currently.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, if there's no other questions on this item, then I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the recommendation of staff and grant permission to print the staff draft West Hyattsville Queens Chapel sector plan and proposed SMA and transmit to the county executive and district council for their review and identification of any public facilities inconsistencies.
I would second and like to commend the staff on the work that they've done so far. Outstanding work. It's an area that I'm very accustomed to when I worked at the University of Maryland 100 years ago, but good job. Well done.
Thank you. We got a motion by Commissioner Washington and a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Under discussion, I would just say I would associate myself with Vice Chair Bailey's remarks. Again, I'm just so proud of you all for this incredibly creative and innovative work and the potential for this to have a pretty transformative impact on the community in all sorts of ways. So thank you. Other discussion? If not, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington?
I vote aye and also associate myself with all the comments by my colleagues. Thank you.
Vice Chair Bailey?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner?
Vote aye and agree. Great job.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for your comments.
Next, we'll move on to item 6 on our agenda. This is preliminary plan of subdivision 4-23032 New Carrollton Town Center. This is a continuance request. Mr. Diaz-Campbell is going to be presenting, and Mr. Shipp may have something that he wants to add as well. Do I see Mr. Diaz-Campbell on the line? Ah, there he is. Morning, sir.
Good morning. All right, shall I go ahead?
Yep.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, I am Eddie Diaz-Campbell, Planner 3 with the Subdivision Section. Item number 6 on the agenda is the preliminary plan of subdivision for the New Carrollton Town Center, 4-23032. The subject project proposes 12 parcels for development of 1,000 multifamily dwelling units and 810,000 square feet of commercial uses. At this time, staff and the applicant are still working together on issues pertaining to the conditions of approval of both the preliminary plan of subdivision and the associated certificate of adequacy, ADQ-2023-056. The certificate of adequacy has not yet been approved and must be approved by the planning director prior to the publishing of the technical staff report and the planning board hearing. Staff recommend a 3-week continuance of the case to allow time for discussion with the applicant, approval of the certificate of adequacy, and publishing of the staff report. The staff report will be published on or before May 16. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. If there's no questions for staff, Mr. Shipp, anything you want to add on this continuance request?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, Bill Shipp with O'Malley, Miles, Nylund, and Gilmore with offices in Greenbelt here for the applicant. I want to thank Mr. Diaz-Campbell for his continued efforts to help us navigate through the conditions in the ADQ. Ms. Connor's been very helpful, as has your counsel, David Warner. We really only have a few items left that we're just trying to come together. I won't call them issues. We're coming together, but we need a little more time. So we would appreciate the board's indulgence on a 3-week continuance.
Okay. So, commissioners, you've heard the request for continuance. If there's no questions or concerns or comments, then I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the 3-week continuance for preliminary plan 4-23032.
Second.
We've got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Are we clear with the date of the continuance, the 3 weeks? The date is okay with Mr. Shipp and our team, yeah? Okay.
Yes.
If there's no further discussion, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Thank you, Mr. Shipp.
Thank you, everybody.
Next item is item 7 on our agenda. This is a preliminary plan of subdivision PPS 2023-026 Iglesia de Jesucristo Palabra Miel, which is a lovely name for a church, if I may say. This is an evidentiary hearing. So if there are folks who are speaking, I will sign them in at the appropriate time. We have Ms. Gupta who will be giving a staff presentation. We have a Ms. Dolopolsky who will be representing the applicant. And I'll start with Ms. Gupta.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. You can hear me okay?
We can hear you okay. Thanks for checking.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. For the record, I'm Mridula Gupta with the subdivision section. Item number 7 on the agenda is a preliminary plan of subdivision PPS-2023-026 titled Iglesia de Jesucristo Palabra Miel. This conservation subdivision proposes one parcel for 10,247 square feet of institutional development, specifically a church. This application is supported by an approved certificate of adequacy ADQ-2023-046. Based on the findings presented in the technical staff report, staff recommend that the planning board approve this preliminary plan of subdivision PPS-2023-026 and Type 1 Tree Conservation Plan TCP 1-001-2024, subject to the findings and conditions in the staff report. If it is the pleasure of the board to make a motion, this would conclude staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gupta. Any questions for staff before we turn to the applicants? Seeing none, Ms. Dolopolsky, and I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong.
Nope, that was very good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. No, that was an excellent pronunciation. It's a tricky one. Good afternoon, Chair Shapiro and members of the board. Just for the record, my name is Heather Dolopolsky, land use and zoning attorney with Wire Gill LLP and the attorney assisting the applicant. We have several members of the church here, and I expect that other than me just speaking briefly, we'll probably just have one church member give a few short remarks, and then I expect that we wouldn't have any more affirmative speakers. So on behalf of the church, I think I see a picture of a good number of them, but I'll name the ones that I know are here. Rigoberto Perez, Pastor Anibal Estrada, and Jorge Davila with Iglesia de Jesucristo Palabra Miel. We also have Eric Tissue and Jack Good, who are our engineer and traffic consultant with AMT Engineering. So first, I just want to express how incredibly happy we are to be here. This has been such a long time coming. We've been working with the church since the end of 2021. And every time I talk with them and with AMT, I say, I think we have faced every challenge possible on this project, and we have managed to overcome them. And so we are so happy to be here today. I don't think in my 18-year career I've ever been actually so happy to be here for a hearing on a project. We had the transition from the prior zoning ordinance to the current zoning ordinance, the nuances of the conservation subdivision provisions, and I think we are the lucky first conservation subdivision under the new zoning ordinance. When we started working with MNC PPC staff back a number of years ago, they said one of the challenges for conservation subdivisions is to actually find an outside organization who will be the signatory to the conservation easement and act as the steward. And they said, kind of, good luck trying to find someone. It's tough. But we got to Googling and we found a really great partner with an organization called Green Trust Alliance, and they'll be entering into the conservation easement with us. We encountered lot coverage issues at the last minute and ended up having to sort of redesign and take what were our zoning ordinance required parking spaces outside the building and actually we'll be moving them inside the existing building. It's an existing barn structure, very large. We're only using a very small portion of it for the place of worship. So we'll actually be moving those parking spaces inside. So I say all of this parking spaces. That is just a very short list of the challenges that we've had to overcome to be here. The Iglesia is just, they're wonderful people. They fell in love with this property, and I'll just have them say a very few quick words, and then we're happy to answer any questions you may have. We're in full agreement with the staff report and all of the proposed conditions of approval. So with that, I will conclude and ask whoever may be speaking on behalf of the church to speak up.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dolopolsky. And before the church members speak, I see 4 of you on the screen. I'm going to swear you all in just in case, because I'm not sure who's speaking. So for the 4 of you I see on the screen, or anyone else who's going to be speaking, if you could raise your right hand, please. Are the other folks hearing me?
So that's Rigoberto. That's you all.
Yes, we can listen to you.
Speak. If you could raise your right hand. Thank you. I solemnly
yes.
swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
I do. Okay. And please go. Identify yourself for the record, and we'd love to hear your words.
Good afternoon. My name is Jorge Davila, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and Planning Board. And first of all, I want to thank God for giving us the opportunity to appear here before you and for giving us a life to live this moment. This is a very special moment for us. And I want to thank all everybody in the Planning Board, the staff members, everybody involved in the process. This process is taking us a very long time. It's been very difficult, and the vision started back in 1985. It's been a very special process. We've seen a lot of difficulties and challenges, but now we understand why. And more than looking for a place, we believe that God has prepared this place for us. And as God saw the need to send his son to earth for salvation, we feel it is necessary for us to work in this area to spread the gospel of salvation. So that is our goal, that is our vision and our desire. And we thank you again. We appreciate your hard work and the time spent reviewing this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words as well. We have other folks who are going to be speaking, or is that it?
Nope, that's it. We are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have no one else who has signed up to speak on this case before us, so I'm going to close the hearing. And commissioners, any deliberation? And if not, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve preliminary plan 2023-026 and TCP 1-001-2024, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report.
Second.
We've got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. If there is no discussion on the motion, actually under discussion, the other thing I want to say is appreciate all of your patience and the kind words for our staff. And we're looking forward to you all being good neighbors in our county and continuing the good work that you do. Much appreciated. If there's no further discussion, I will call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington.
A vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you so much. We are delighted. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Next, we'll go on to item 8 on our agenda. This is preliminary plan of subdivision PPS 2023-005 Michael's Retreat. We have Mr. Hatcher, who's representing the applicant. We have Mr. Diaz-Campbell, who's representing the staff. This is an evidentiary hearing, so if there are folks who are going to be speaking besides those two I mentioned, I will be swearing them in. We do have some folks who signed up in opposition. I will deal with that when the time comes, unless Mr. Hatcher, you have, or Mr. Diaz-Campbell, you have thoughts on that as well. But let's start with the staff presentation, and then we'll hear from Mr. Hatcher. Sorry, Mr. Hatcher. Mr. Diaz-Campbell.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, I'm Eddie Diaz-Campbell, Planner 3 with the subdivision section. Item number 8 on the agenda is the preliminary plan of subdivision for Michael's Retreat, PPS-2023-005. The subject project proposes 155 lots and 18 parcels for development of 155 single-family attached dwellings. The application is subject to approved certificate of adequacy ADQ-2023-010. Staff received several items of additional backup for this item before the noon deadline on April 30, 2024. The first item, Applicant's Exhibit 1, is an exhibit from the applicant requesting 5 revisions to staff recommended conditions of approval. Staff is in agreement with the requested revisions. The 2nd through 8th items, opponents exhibits 1 through 7, were submitted by Mr. Steve Gaskins of ABC Land Surveying, LLC, on behalf of Mr. Herschel Carpenter, who owns a property known as Parcel 83, which is surrounded on 3 sides by the applicant's property. Mr. Gaskins and Mr. Carpenter, who are signed up to speak at this hearing, have raised concerns regarding a 60-foot wide right-of-way, which they say has been established next to their property, and which they say is not being honored by the applicant. Staff reviewed the exhibits submitted by the neighbor and found that they did not provide enough information to determine conclusively whether the right-of-way currently exists or whether the neighbor has any property right in it. The neighbor's claim that there is a right-of-way is not grounds for disapproval of the preliminary plan of subdivision. Rather, the claim is a private matter which should be settled between the applicant and the neighbor, rather than by the planning board. Staff recommend adoption of the findings of the technical staff report and approval of the preliminary plan of subdivision subject to conditions contained in the staff report, as modified by applicant's Exhibit 1. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Just one question for you and perhaps for Mr. Warner as well. So, my understanding is that if somebody's claiming that they have an easement over the property, that's not really a matter for us. That's a matter for the courts. It's somebody's claiming that, but I just want to make sure I understand. And Mr. Warner, maybe you could weigh in as well. Do we want to be hearing evidence at this hearing as to whether the applicant owns all the property or not? Or do we not even consider that issue at all and weigh that evidence, and that's strictly a matter for the courts?
Thank you, Chair. David Warner, Principal Counsel. Yes, we should be hearing evidence on that. It's not something that should be excluded for any reason. This applicant claims to have an easement interest over the property. We didn't find sufficient evidence in the documents they submitted to show that's the case one way or the other. Of course, preliminary plans of subdivision often have all sorts of easements over them. And sometimes those easements require us to, apply conditions that will say, you got to address something at detailed site plan or at final plat because there's this easement that crosses where you want to build the townhouse or something like that. We might address those issues if we need to, but the only time you would have a situation where you might have an issue that you have to address a preliminary plan of subdivision regarding property ownership. If someone was coming into this hearing and claiming that they own the property and here's the deed and it's, evidence that the applicant doesn't own the property, okay, that might be an issue. But when you have easements, there's always lots of easements to deal with. And this individual wants to present evidence of their easement interest, and that's fine.
Okay, thank you for that. Commissioners, if no other questions for staff, let me turn to the applicant. Mr. Hatcher, take it away. Introduce yourself for the record.
For the record, my name is Chris Hatcher with CL Hatcher LLC. The office is in Upper Marlboro, here on behalf of the applicant, A. DeCeres Holding Company, LLC. We'd like to hear with respect to application PPS 2023-005 and associate TCP 1006-2024. We'd like to first thank staff for working with the applicant on this application. This application presented quite an interesting set of nuanced issues that we were all collectively able to navigate very collaboratively. Additionally, we'd like to thank all the community stakeholders that we've been in communication with on this application, between the community meetings and the phone calls and the Zooms and the sitting in people's houses, just trying to understand the issues and work through it with them. We're particularly proud of just the overwhelming level of professionalism that everybody showed as we navigated this process. One of the things that we did spend the application on some time.
Mr. Hatcher, we're no longer hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's very faint. Very, very faint.
No,
we lost you. It sounds, dare I say, to micromanage, it sounds mechanical, like it's plugged in, but like there's something's muffled.
Understood. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, a little. We heard a ping.
If we could just have just one moment of grace.
Yeah, sure. Commissioners, would it be helpful to take a break? Do we need a 5-minute break or something like that? Or are we okay?
We can do that, and then that'll give them a second to work on their rod.
Okay. So it's 12:41. Why don't we come back at let's come back at 12:47.
Story about my life.
All right, we are all gathered. We're for the public. We're back from a quick 5-minute break. We are taking up item 8 on our agenda. This is preliminary plan of subdivision 2023-005 Mackles Retreat. We've heard from staff, and now we're hearing from the applicant's representative, Mr. Hatcher. Take it away.
For the record, my name is Chris Hatcher with CL Hatcher, here on behalf of the applicant, A. DeSaris Holding Company, LLC. I did have an opportunity to share some things, certainly my praise for staff and their diligence and the community for working with us diligently through the process. Where I believe we got muffled, and I apologize for my technology issues, commissioners, was just one of the community members who is here to speak, Mr. Carpenter, and our coordination with him and the person who purports to be his representative, the civil engineer. We have met with them several times. They did provide the applicant with the documents that were submitted in the record. We did have our title attorney review it along with members from our design team, and candidly, it just we couldn't find just a lot of credibility in what we were being told in the documents. Despite that, my client, the applicant, will continue to work very collaboratively with all stakeholders, including Mr. Carpenter, as we try to navigate the claims that he is making that is on our property, whether they're real or not. With that, we did submit an applicant's exhibit 1 into the record. I believe it's labeled applicant's exhibit A, the document itself. Staff has been able to review it, and I think you heard Mr. Diaz-Campbell say that they are supportive. And so there are several of us here to speak. Mr. Linhart for if there are any transportation related questions, and David Bickle from Soltez, if there are any civil engineering related questions, and my client, Mr. DeSaris, is here on the line as well. However, we are all here to respond to any questions if you have them. With that, we respectfully request that the planning board approve adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law contained in the staff report, and approve preliminary plan PPS 2023-05 and associated TCP with the proposed revisions contained in applicant's exhibit number 1. We're here to respond to any questions if you have.
Thank you, Mr. Hatcher. And if there's any opportunity for folks from the team to speak, we'll swear them in at that time, since this is an evidentiary hearing. With that, we'll go to our speakers list. We do have a couple folks who are signed up to speak in opposition. Let me just check to see who's here. Mr. Carpenter and Mr. Gaskins, are you both on the line? Are you both here? Mr. Carpenter? Staff, can you look to see on the list to see if they're there? I just don't want to miss them the opportunity if they're signed up to speak. Mr. Gaskins or Mr. Carpenter?
Mr. Chairman, I do see Steve Gaskins on the line, but the GoToMeeting application seems to be indicating he doesn't have sound, so I don't know if he can hear us or is able to speak.
Mr. Gaskins, can you turn on your camera just to see if you're hearing us and acknowledging us? because we can't hear you if you're there and you're speaking. Oh, there you are, Mr. Gaskins. Can you hear us? Raise your hand if you can hear us. We can't hear you though. Do the basic, which is unmute yourself, and see if that solves it. If not, we'll give you a minute or two, and you can call in. But first, you are muted on our side, so is it possible for you to unmute yourself? No? Okay. So call in. We can't hear you, Mr. Gaskins. But staff, is there somebody who can help Mr. Gaskins to make sure he can call in?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we'll give him the phone number and the access code so he can call in. Do that right now.
Great. Rather than take another break, Mr. Warner, is it okay if we pause items, if we pause this agenda item until we work out the technology and go to the next item on our agenda? Can we do that? Can we embed another item in the middle of this item?
Yeah, you can just recess this item until later in the meeting.
All right, so we will recess this item. We'll give Mr. Gaskins a minute or two to figure out the technology with our staff. And let us go on to item 9 on our agenda. This is a Countywide Planning Division, MRF, Mandatory Referral 2023-009, Templeton Elementary School Replacement. Majette Parker is representing the applicant. We have Ms. Walker with the staff presentation. And let us turn to staff. Ms. Walker.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. For the record, this is Tania Walker with the Special Projects section. This mandatory referral review is MRF-2023-009 for Templeton Elementary School. This proposal was reviewed per Land Use Article Section 20-301 through 305 of the Maryland Annotated Code for Mandatory Referrals. This project is for the demolition of the existing school building and associated infrastructure to construct a new educational facility on an 8.63 acre parcel. This is one of the 8 school replacement projects proposed in the second phase of the Prince George's County Public Schools Blueprint Program. The first phase, announced in October of 2019, included 6 schools, all which have been reviewed by the Planning Board as mandatory referral applications. The blueprint for Prince George's County Public Schools take an innovative approach to school construction financing through public-private partnership to meet the needs of the district. Next slide, please. The project is in Council District 5 and Planning Area 69 in the Established Communities Growth Policy Area. Next slide, please. The 8.63 acre site for the proposed educational facility is located on land owned by the Board of Education. The site is bounded by Carter's Lane to the north, Templeton Knowles Park to the east, and 59th Avenue and single-family homes to the south and west. Next slide, please. The site is zoned as RSF-65 residential single family. Next slide, please. The aerial view of the site shows the existing schools with the associated buildings. Next slide, please. The site is in the 8-digit Anacostia River watershed. The site's topography varies in elevation. Next slide, please. The site is located south of Carter's Lane and west of Baltimore-Washington Parkway. Next slide, please. The proposed project includes a 120,000 square foot educational facility. A parking lot and bus lane will be constructed, and the project will also include 2 outdoor formal classrooms and a school garden with teaching stations. Next slide, please. The applicant distributed flyers for a community meeting that was held on February the 13th, and the planning department mailed all adjoining confirming abutting property owners and all area civic associations. Next slide, please. The site plan here shows the layout of the new educational facility along with the parking. Next slide, please. Here is a view of the proposed school building from the front entrance and the rear entrance. Next slide, please. The next two slides list the staff's recommendations. Some are to provide additional pedestrian access via a concrete sidewalk from the terminus of Jennifer Place at the western edge of the property to the south side of the school, and to consult with the fire department to ensure that the width and treatment of the drive aisle to the maintenance building for fire and other emergency vehicles is appropriate. Staff also received recommendations from the Prince George's County Department of Public Works and Transportation and the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement. They were added to the backup. This proposed project was found to be in conformance with the Planning Board's adopted uniform standards for mandatory referral review as set forth in the technical staff report. Staff recommends that the Planning Board adopt the staff recommendations and transmit them to the applicant. This concludes staff presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Much appreciated. If there's no questions for staff, we'll turn to the applicant, Mr. Parker. Let me just say also, Mr. Matlock, it's a pleasure to see you again. We're glad you're here with us, and thanks for your patience. And Mr. Parker, I'll turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Majette Parker, an attorney with the law office of Majette S. Parker, with offices in Camp Springs, Maryland, here on behalf of this mandatory referral application, and in fact, all 8 of the applications as land use counsel. I'm going to turn over to Sean Matlock from the actual applicant, Prince George's County Public School System, to just briefly state how we feel at this moment. This is just fantastic to be here, the first of the 8 schools with a dynamic team. But he'll do a few remarks, and then I will introduce the team, and then we'll move on from there. Thank you. Sean?
Thank you very much, Chairman and Planning Board members. I appreciate you having us here. I appreciate the speed in which the staff has reviewed our documentation and made it possible for us to be here. We've worked very closely with them. They've been very, very accommodating. And we are just very excited to advance these 8 schools, this being the first of 8. And this is an opportunity, once in a lifetime opportunity to update our facilities with a lot of support from the state. We just are very thankful for this opportunity. We've been reaching out to our community. As I think you saw, we had the February 13th meeting. We also had a kickoff meeting in December with some of the community members. And we've already started putting together a planning committee with the community that will be meeting in this month, as a matter of fact, to start doing some tweaks around the design of the building to make it more part of the community. So we're very, very excited, and we thank you for having us here. And at that point, I think I'm going to turn this back to Mr. Parker and let him do what he does best here and guide us through this process.
Thank you, Mr. Matlock. Mr. Parker.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. Again, Majette Parker. I'm going to briefly introduce the members of the development team. We've got an outstanding team put together under part of the P3 public-private partnership. And they start with a really fantastic architectural team of Perkins Eastman. We have 2 representatives that are already signed up to speak, but they're here to answer questions. Jack Chin and Sean O'Donnell of Perkins Eastman. We have Kathy Dixon, who is actually the lead architect on the public school side to help review the plans. We also have the engineering firm of Bradley Site Design. Ivan Zapata is signed up. Fantastic traffic engineer, Carl Wilson, who you've seen many times before, of the traffic group. Sharon Bradley of Bradley Site Design as well. So we're just very thrilled. And again, we appreciate the level of detail and the coordination across not only MNCPP, but the permitting staffs as well. We've been meeting, I think, weekly with representatives of DPI, DPW&T to make sure we pull this all together, along with the Prince George's County Public School System, to deliver very quickly these schools that are much needed in Prince George's County. So with that, I'm going to see if there are any questions. Our team stands ready to answer them. We've reviewed the staff recommendations and the staff report and all the supplemental material as well. we're in complete agreement to move forward with an action of approval with these recommendations, which we take under serious consideration. But if there are any questions among the members of the planning board, we're here to answer those as well. So thank you very much for this opportunity to bring this very first of the 8 schools under the second phase of this P3 Blueprint Schools update for Prince George's County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant or other members, or any members of the team on this mandatory referral?
So I have a question about, if you can flip over to maybe like the aerial map, which I think is slide 5. So I know that you're doing some trail connections to Grover's Park that we've got. We also have the Templeton Knoll Park that's just like directly east of this red kind of figure right here on the same street. What I wanted to find out was I don't think we have water access in that park, and I wanted to ask whether or not that would be possible to extend one of the water mains. So if our park staff did want to put water fountains in there, if they could tap into the same connection that you all are doing, and then what you're doing in terms of like water fountains or different kind of access on fields outside of the school for when kids are out there playing and doing other outside activities.
Well, I can't comment on the ability to extend the water hookup. I do know that as a policy, we have not been putting in fountains on the outside for several reasons. One, the first one being that it does require a lot of maintenance. 2, we've had experience with a lot of vandalism on those types of equipment. And then there's a limited time when they can actually operate because of the seasons changing and having to turn it off and on and drain the pipes and that sort of thing. So there are a lot of different reasons why that's something we haven't done. But as far as the technical side of whether or not that could be extended, I will leave that to one of our engineers or staff.
Yes, this is Ivan with Bradley Site Design. From a technical aspect, we can't extend that line over there. We just would have to coordinate with WSSC and the applicant to make sure that's something that we can provide.
So we hope that answers that question, and again, we will take that under consideration and work to address it if at all possible.
Okay, yeah, if we can just add that into one of the staff recommendations, that'd be great. Because bigger picture for mainly Mr. Matlock for the other projects that you're going to be working on. We have trails that go by a lot of schools in the county, and we don't have great access to water alongside the trails because we don't have water connections within there. A way that the state of Virginia has done an incredible job along the trails to providing water fill stations is to work with schools jointly to try and add in the lines so that way they can tap into them and establish the water refill stations along the trails. And when I talked to the people there, they said that's one of the most successful kind of like ventures they've had jointly with the public schools to do it. So if we can do that, that'd be fantastic to have the opportunity to do that.
We will certainly consider it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, any other questions for the applicant? I just want to, it's not a question, but just to note, I so appreciate the collaborative approach that you've taken with this. This is mandatory referral, so our authority is different on this, but it hopefully speaks to the value of the mandatory referral process and for our staff and their involvement and collaboration with you to results in a better project. And that's what I'm hearing from you all, and I appreciate that. And that's all I really wanted to say and add. And I'm excited about this this first of 8 as well. If there's no other questions or comments, commissioners, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt and accept the analysis of staff and approve MRF-2023-009 to include the recommendations as outlined in staff's report, plus the additional recommendation to explore water access to the property consistent with Chairman Dorner's comments, and transmit the recommendations to the Prince George's County Public Schools. And I too am excited about this first of 8. So congratulations to all.
I'll second and make a friendly amendment that it be Commissioner Dorner, not Chairman, because I'm not quite in that seat yet.
Oh, well, so sorry about that. I totally accept that correction. My apologies.
We've got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Chair Dorner. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey. We got 2.
You're muted.
I know.
That's a vote aye. There we go. I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Appreciate all the fine work on this. Mr. Parker, Mr. Matlock, good to see you again, and thanks to the entire team.
Thank you. And again, it's been a pleasure working with the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission staff, special sessions, and others. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Commissioners, I'm going to move on to item 20. It's a very quick item. We're still on recess for item 8. So item 8, folks, Mr. Gaskins, be patient with us. And I actually
I'm here now.
You are.
Everything's
but
working.
Hold on. The next item is going to be real quick. And I believe that Mr. Carpenter may be on the line as well. So we're going to go to item 10, preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22014 Hill Road property. We have Mr. Haller representing the applicant. We have Mr. D.S. Campbell, who's giving a staff presentation. This is a request for a continuance to June 27. We did have folks who signed up to speak. I just want to see if the folks who signed up to speak are actually here. Ms. Queen or Mr. Edwards, are you on the line? Ms. Queen, Mr. Edwards. Again, this is a request for a continuance. So what I was going to say, if you were on the line, is we're not here to talk about the substance of this because there's a request for continuance before us. But I don't hear any responses from them. So very briefly, let's turn to staff. Mr. D.S. Campbell. Again, it's a request for continuance. Mr. D.S. Campbell, take it away.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. For the record, I'm A. D.S. Campbell, Planner 3 with the subdivision section. Item number 10 on the agenda is the preliminary plan subdivision for the Hill Road property, 4-22014. The subject project proposes 2 parcels and 1 outlot for 8,574 square feet of commercial development. The application is subject to approved certificate of adequacy 80Q-2022-015. Staff received 2 items of additional backup for this item before the noon deadline on April 30, 2024. The first item, Applicant's Exhibit 1, is a request from the applicant for continuance of the case to June 27, 2024. The purpose of the continuance is to allow the applicant to continue to work with the Coalition of Central Prince George's County Community Organizations on issues related to development of the property. The Coalition has not yet taken a position on the application, and the applicant wants the Coalition's position to be available prior to the planning board hearing. Staff have no objections to the requested continuance. The second item, Opponent's Exhibit 1, has been submitted by the Greater Capital Heights Improvement Corporation in opposition to approval of the preliminary plan subdivision. The exhibit contains a letter explaining several reasons why the corporation believes the preliminary plan should be disapproved, as well as supporting material. Staff have not yet taken a position on the objections raised by the corporation due to the request for continuance. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. D.S. Campbell. If there's no questions for staff, I'll turn to Mr. Haller. Anything you want to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thomas Haller on behalf of the applicant. No, I don't have anything to add. Ms. Queen and Mr. Edwards, or Reverend Edwards, as you know, are affiliated with the coalition, and we are continuing to work with them. We understand that this is in the Central Avenue corridor, and their input on this project is important to us as well as to the board. So we are continuing to work with them and plan to be meeting with them in their June meeting. Appreciate the opportunity to present to you this morning. We support the request for continuance.
Thank you, Mr. Haller. So there's no one else to speak to us in this matter. Again, it's a request for continuance. Commissioners, what is your pleasure on this?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the request to continue preliminary plan 4-22014 to planning board hearing date of June 27, 2024.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, seconded by Vice Chair Bailey. There's no discussion. I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Haller. Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. And now we are back to item 8. Thanks everybody for your patience on this. Now let's see. Do we have Mr. Gaskins? I see Mr. Hatcher. We're looking for Mr. Gaskins and Mr. Carpenter. They may be on. Mr. Gaskins, we can see you. Can we hear you too? Speak up. Let's make sure we can hear you.
Yes, I
Yes,
fixed
sir.
it by logging out and coming back in.
We're so glad. Mr. Carpenter, my understanding is Mr. Carpenter is trying to get on the line as well. Staff, if we had any success with that, is Mr. Carpenter able to join us?
I
No?
think
Okay.
Mr. Carpenter, him being an elderly person, he had trouble trying to do the online, so I told him to call. And I'm not quite sure whether he understands how to do all of this.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gaskins. So we do have you.
Mr. Carpenter.
Oh, Mr. Carpenter, you are there. Okay, great.
Oh,
Mr.
good.
Carpenter, Mr. Carpenter, you want to go first? Or you want to have Mr. Gaskins go first? I'm fine either way. I'm going to give you both 3 minutes to speak. The applicant didn't take much time, and we want to make sure that there's a balance of time between the applicant and any opposition. So you'll each have 3 minutes. If you can manage your time as you see fit, Mr. Carpenter, I will give you the opportunity to go first if you want, unless you want Mr. Gaskins to go first.
Chair Shapiro.
I'll be sure to swear them in. Mr. Carpenter, actually for both, thank you, Mr. Warner. For both of you, I need to swear you in since this is an evidentiary hearing. So let me ask Mr. Carpenter and Mr. Gaskins if you could raise your right hand.
All right.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Carpenter, you want to go first? We'll put a clock up here to help us manage the time. And if you could introduce yourself, name and address for the record, and take it away. The floor is yours, and I'm glad we worked through the technical issues.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Mr. Carpenter, and I live on 7300 Accokeek Road, Brandywine, Maryland, 20613, right adjacent to the townhouse development next door. I was told, I heard about this project about a year or so ago, and I talked to one of the builders, and he said there's going to be about 8 townhouses or per acre. Then finally got the drawing, and I see they're building 16 townhouses per acre. And also, my privacy means a lot to me because I've been here for 65 years in the same house, and it's my whole life right here. And I'd just like to have if you could possibly build a private fence, a privacy fence around my property before they start this stuff. And it's just it's about to got a knot in my stomach. I don't think too good anymore like I used to. I'm sorry. You got to forgive me for all this. But and also I noticed that there's been a 6-foot right of way in my property on the west side of it, and it's been there since 1960 when Mom and Dad built this house. I was 15 years old, and I see that they're going to build right on top of that 6-foot right of way and put those townhouses right up in my face. There's going to be like 16 of them. It'd be like a watchtower looking over my yard. That's got me about a knot in my stomach. But anyway, Steve can go further than that with you. But it's
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter, for speaking to that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Do you have more?
No, that's okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Mr. Gaskins.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Okay, Mr. Gaskins.
Yes, my name's Steve Gaskins. I've been surveying almost 60 years, and I've done a lot of subdivisions, and I know that you have a standard of care in which you have to submit and deal with the public. In this case, I met Mr. Carpenter sometime about a year ago. He hired me to bring some understanding to what was going on. He showed me an old survey, and I submitted all these documents into record. And it showed a 60-foot right-of-way next to his. He wasn't sure whether it was there or not there, but he knew it was there since his parents lived, since the 60s or the 50s. And it was established by the 2 deeds that were on both sides. The plan now is eliminated the deed that shows the other side. I don't know why it eliminated the deed, because the zoning map, which I did put into record, the rezoning map shows that parcel, and it shows the 60-foot right-of-way. I have surveyed the 60-foot right-of-way and found property corners. So therefore, the 60-foot right-of-way is there, but it's just not identified by the plan. I did submit a markup, a red line markup, that shows the 60-foot right-of-way and a crosshatch. Therefore, it does exist. The applicant's engineer, this has gone through 3 different engineers, first Ben Dyer, then Dewberry, and now we have Soltesz. So Soltesz did acknowledge it and put it on the plan. So that's why I highlighted on the sketch that I submitted. I surveyed this and I submitted my survey worksheet. I want to be able to keep the record open so I can submit this particular survey with all the details. I submitted the 2 deeds that created the right-of-ways and established them in 1959 and 1960. They did not go away because these things were already there. No one extinguished them. If they want to extinguish them, then 30 feet goes to Mr. Carpenter and 30 feet goes to the applicant. But I've never met with them. The time that we wanted to meet, they came and met only with my client, Mr. Carpenter. They didn't want to meet with me because they didn't make the time. When I emailed them last time after the community meeting, they sent me no documents, absolutely none. So I had to go to the county to get the documents that were available. After I got the documents that were available, I verified that there was a 60-foot right-of-way. And then here recently, I emailed them and said, send me all the documents you sent in the application. They didn't send me anything but the preliminary plan. They did not send me the TCP. I mean, these are things that they have to do and required by law. They have a standard of duty of care to send these things to the public. And that's the end of my statement.
Thank you, Mr. Gaskins. We're going to hear from the, if there's no questions for these folks who spoke for the opposition commissioners, let's turn back to the applicant for rebuttal and close. That is our process. And Mr. Hatcher, I certainly want to, I imagine I speak on behalf of my fellow commissioners that we'd like to hear your response to this and the position that you're taking. I also want to hear from our council too, in terms of what is appropriate or not appropriate for us to take up given the information that we have. But let's start with Mr. Hatcher.
For the record, my name is Chris Hatcher with CL Hatcher here on behalf of the applicant. The applicant, more specifically the owners of the property, met with Mr. Carpenter at his home at least once, but my recollection is multiple times, and pulled out plans and discussed various things, including the privacy fence that he's referring to. Again, as I said in the direct, the applicant looks forward to working with the property owner on ways to help mitigate some of that anxiety or concern, particularly the impact that this proposed development could have on the property, independent of whether it's legally required to, in the zoning ordinance, provide some type of additional landscaping or privacy fence to help calm some of those concerns. With respect to the actual documents that were submitted into the record, again, my client was provided those documents by Mr. Carpenter and his civil engineer. They have been reviewed not only by our design team, but by our title attorney, who did issue the title insurance. And so to the extent that this property owner believes that they have a right that isn't reflected, that wasn't reflected in the title report or reflected on the preliminary plan, the appropriate forum for them to go to, in my humble opinion, is the court system, not necessarily this administrative proceeding. However, independent of whether this is the appropriate forum or not, we reiterate our commitment to working with them to come through with some type of solution, because candidly, my client has been here for 60 years doing work in Prince George's County and would like to continue doing work in Prince George's County, and their good name is very important to them.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hatcher. That is your rebuttal. Any close, or are you're good enough?
The applicant stands on what they submitted in their direct and the rebuttal, and would reiterate with respect, the applicant would respectfully request that the planning board approve this preliminary plan in TCP 1 as revised by applicant's exhibit 1.
Thank you. So I'd like to hear from Mr. Warner. I mean, commissioners, it sounds to me like this is a matter for the courts and not us. But I would like to hear from Mr. Warner and staff, Mr. Diaz-Campbell or Mr. Hunt, if there's anything you want to add on that matter as well, just to make sure we're doing things by the book and being respectful of Mr. Carpenter and Mr. Gaskins. So, Mr. Warner.
Thank you, Chair Shapiro. David Warner, Principal Counsel. So as staff made clear in their presentation, they did review the materials submitted by the opponents, and based on their expertise, we're obviously not a title company, but based on their expertise in evaluating the documents, as did I, we couldn't discern any easement on the property from the materials they submitted. So based on that, we didn't have anything to provide, or staff didn't have anything to provide to you with regard to a recommendation to make any change to their approval based on those documents that were submitted. The applicant or the opponent has suggested that they would like to submit additional information, and that is, of course, always permitted even after you make a decision in this case, because the record stays open until you adopt the resolution memorializing your decision. So they can submit additional items into the record, and they're free to do so. And otherwise, were they to have an easement on this property through perhaps some later action on their part, it wouldn't defeat your approval of the preliminary plan. It may cause a private matter between the two of them to have to be resolved by the courts, or however the two private parties want to resolve it. But everything you've received so far, staff and with my review, has not suggested there's anything that would change staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. How much time does the opposition have to submit any additional materials before the order is issued?
Well, we have in our procedures a requirement that we adopt our resolution within 3 weeks. It would probably be beneficial to the opponent for you to indicate when potentially this resolution will be adopted, so they know they have enough time. But in their best interest would be to submit that information within a week, because that's the soonest the resolution could be adopted. So I'd advise the opponents to do so in the next week to ensure it all gets in the record before you adopt the resolution.
All right, so Mr. Gaskins, Mr. Carpenter, any additional items you want to put in the record, please do that within a week, and it will be included in this case before us. Mr. Hunt or Mr. Diaz-Campbell, anything else you want to add to this for the record, or we're good to go?
Real quick, just for the record, James Hunt with the Development Review Division. We do definitely understand Mr. Carpenter's concerns. Most of those concerns, which is what was indicated by Mr. Hatcher, will be handled at the time of detailed site plan, which was indicated within the page 12, I believe, of the staff report. A detailed site plan will be required. So items such as landscaping, fencing, all that will be discussed at that time. So we will expect this application to come back before the planning board, in which at the time of submission of this application, staff will examine the fencing, the buffering, and everything relevant to the landscape manual and the requirements of the landscape manual. So we do understand, we do take those comments seriously into concern, And we understand the concerns that are brought up by Mr. Carpenter, and we will take that into consideration at that time.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Hatcher has already indicated that he understands that this is an ongoing conversation with the opposition, and it sounds like you are more than willing to find some common ground to address some of these issues. Okay, great. All right, commissioners, if there's nothing else that you all want to hear, the public hearing is closed and it's to us for any deliberation, or if there is none, I would look for a motion.
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me begin by saying I thank you for your follow-on questions with regards to what the opponents raised. And I hope it's clear to them that this is but one step as part of the process. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve PPS-2023-005 and TCP1-006-2024, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report and as further modified by applicant exhibit number 1.
Second.
We've got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Mr. Carpenter, Mr. Gaskins, thank you both very much. It's an ongoing conversation. Mr. Hatcher, thank you as well. Mr. Diaz-Campbell, Mr. Hunt, Mr. Ray, good to see you.
Good to you very much.
And Mr. Warner, as always. I don't believe we have any further items before us on the agenda. We jumped around a bit, but I think we covered
one more item.
Sorry.
No, you have item 12, Chair.
Oh, okay. See, there we go. One more item on the agenda, item 12. Hold on, don't go anywhere. Okay, countywide planning division. Mr. Ray, that's why you showed up at this time.
That's why I'm here.
There we go. 2018 water and sewer service area changes, December 2023 cycle of amendments. We have Mr. Ray, who will be giving a staff presentation on this item. It is an action item for us. And Mr. Ray, introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much, Chairman Shapiro and members of the Planning Board. For the record, my name is Bobby Ray with the Countywide Planning Division in the Special Projects section. Agenda item number 12 is a review and recommendation for applications to amend the 2018 Water and Sewer Plan. Applications in this group include the December, September, and June cycles of 2023. And there were also 2 deferrals from March of last year. Next slide, please. So the role of the Planning Board in this review is a determination of consistency with the general plan and to provide any information and assistance that might be needed by the county executive and or the county council. The memorandum included in the packet provides planning staff recommendations as well as the county executive's recommendations for each of the applications received. The larger report provides all comments from the planning department as well as comments from WSSC, DPI, and the county health department. Next slide, please. A total of 14 applications were reviewed as part of this cycle. I will note only 13 appear on the map in front of you because there is a duplication. One site has actually 2 separate applications for it. So the development represented by the applications includes 113 single-family dwellings. 101 of those are within the Conterra Town Center East development. There's a 176-unit senior housing development, 3 places of worship, 2 distribution warehouses, and 1 healthcare facility. All of the applications are being recommended by the county executive, with the exception of the interim sewer waiver, or the 2 sewer waivers. One of those is being recommended for a sewer category change instead of the waiver request. Planning staff recommendations mirror those of the county executive. Council Resolution CR 023-2024 was introduced on April 2nd, 2024, with the public hearing scheduled for next week on May 7th. And at the direction of the Planning Board, we can go through each of the applications. We have a separate slide for all 14 of them, or we can, I can respond to any specific questions that the board might have on a specific case.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Appreciate that presentation. Commissioners, are there any of these items specifically that I don't think you need to go through them all, but are there any ones that any commissioners you want to single out and have questions about? I think we're okay, Mr. Ray.
All right, great.
So unless there's anything further to hear from staff, commissioners, or any other questions that you have, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the recommendation of staff and approve the transmittal of the planning department's comments to the Prince George's County Council.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye, and thank you, Mr. Ray.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Bailey.
But aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
But aye.
I vote as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Ray.
Thank you very much.
So I looked at the agenda and I don't think there's any more items unless we want to start over with item 5 and go through it all again. Any takers? No? Okay. All right. We are good to go. Mr. Hunt, any further business before us?
Chair, there are no additional business items before you today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Commissioners, without objection, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Bye.